Okay, how did I get a comment before we were even on the air? How did that happen? Hey, Maggie. I, I don't know how that happened. It was still connecting to the internet. Hey, Cali Girl on Fire. This is not going to be about Nancy Guthrie today. And I won't make it that long, but you guys, you need to stick with me on this one because this is a little bit bizarro, to say the least. Hey, Jane. Hey, Kelsers. I'm getting a lot of emails. I'm going to have to catch up on them tonight. Today is laundry day, but I'm taking a little break because I got to get this thing going here. I wasn't going to come live. I really need to just like clean my place and do more laundry, but it's very hot outside. And so I was getting a little almost dehydrated. It's really bad. I'm very sensitive to that now with everything that's happened to me and all the meds that I'm on. I'm super sensitive to the heat. And so the heat was really bothering me. Hey, Nanette. Hey, Kathy X50. Rita Close. Welcome in, everybody. This is a different one. And if not a lot of people see it, that's okay. But this is more of a documentary. So that, even though I don't have any descendants because I don't have any kids, other family members like nieces and nephews and cousins and, their children and their descendants will have this video, assuming YouTube is still around, 50 to 100 years from now. This video will still be archived somewhere regarding our lineage. And I kind of started breaking this down prior to myself being diagnosed with cancer. And I found out some really freaky things. And I was just getting into it, but then I got sick, I got diagnosed, the train went off the tracks. And in the last few weeks, I've been thinking, I need to get back into this. Because I know historically that I'm distantly related to pioneer Daniel Boone. Hey, Kelsers, sounds like we were right. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But we're going to talk about that in a different video. Hey, Sheep Clips. So basically, I started this search, then my life went sideways, and I started thinking I need to pick this back up again. Yeah, I really need to pick this back up again because I know that I'm related to Daniel Boone through his wife, and his wife was a famous Bryan, as in the Irish Bryans, and it's all through my dad's side. My dad didn't know any of this in his life because I talked to my mom about it years ago before she passed. Like, did Dad know any of this about his Irish side of the family? And she said no. He just thought everybody was from Illinois and Wales, but apparently not. And she said he would be absolutely shocked to have all this information. And I said, I need some time, but I'm going to put all this together and I'm going to prove it because, people are saying this is BS, but it's not BS because I said, even though Daniel Boone was one of our, he was like a cousin-in-law to our family, his wife, Rebecca Ann Bryan Boone, she's a relative of mine. She, back from the 1700s, she, I am a descendant of the Davises, the Boones. Well, I'm a descendant of the Davises and the Bryans. And back in the day, I guess when the Davises from Wales and the Boones, who were English and Welsh, and the Bryans, who were Irish, they migrated to the U.S. colonies, like back in the 1700s. And eventually, some of the divisions of those families went to North Carolina. North Carolina was not a state, it was a province. It was the province of North Carolina. And this is back in the frontier days, where it was just like, you're out in the bush with the cowboys and the Indians. In fact, some of the family members didn't survive because a couple of them were killed by Apache Indians, I read. But this was, this was more than 125 years before we became a country, that some of these, like the Bryans, they they were exiled from Ireland and came over on a ship with all their belongings and their horses. It's a crazy, crazy story. And my dad in his lifetime, he just always told me that everybody was from Illinois and they descended from Wales. But I'm like, yeah, but how did they get from Wales to the United States? And he didn't know any of that. And he didn't know that there was this historical connection to the Bryans. He thought all his Davises were poor, like his parents, their parents before. Everybody was, poor people in Illinois. But he was unaware of this North Carolina province connection where these families, and apparently there was the Boones, the Bryans, and the Davises. And back in these days, people had large families. They had lots of children and grandchildren and cousins and nephews and nieces. They were big, big families back in the day. And those families, the Boones, the Bryans, and the Davises, all kind of married into each other's families. Welcome, Allie. Let's see. Okay, let me just get to this. I don't know what that's about. Okay, you guys just run wild in the chat while I get to this. And I'm doing this for historical purposes, for documentary purposes. And what's amazing is since I started this research a few years ago, there is now AI that can help put all of this together. Oh, thank you, Connie. And I need to hydrate. Thank you for reminding me. I'm so dehydrated just from 2 loads of laundry. It was really hard for me today. So before I started this research again, was, lying awake in bed, the constant insomniac. And this weird video, it wasn't a weird video, but it was strange that it popped up on my phone because I'm not following this family. But this photo popped up, or this video of Debbie Boone singing like happy birthday to her dad. And he's like 92 now. They live pretty close to me in Beverly Hills. So they're probably like 15, 20 minutes from me, from where I live in LA. And I'm like, oh, why is this video popping up? I don't follow Debbie Boone or Pat Boone. That's weird, it's popping up in my feed. And I was like, wow, Debbie Boone, she still looks great, but wow, she must be old right now. If I'm this old, Debbie Boone's got to be like really old. At least so I thought. Let me turn off my notifications because I'm getting pop-ups. So I just happened to type her into the internet to see how old she was, and it said that she was 69. I was like, oh, okay, she's not that old. But wow, she still looks really good for 69 because she's always been beautiful. But, look at her dad. I guess back in his day, before my time, he was like a really good-looking dude, and she looks a lot like him. So, all the Boones, they're all like good-looking people on the Debbie Boone side of the family. But I had no idea that I was related to these people. And then it said that her dad was a direct descendant of Daniel Boone. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, that's like the baseball Boones, who I think I'm related to. And I had to go back through all this. Like, wasn't I related to a Rebecca Boone? Like, let me look this up. And I got back onto my Ancestry.com account, went to my family tree, started researching all this, and I'm like, yeah, because Rebecca Boone's maiden name was Bryan. And I'm like, yeah, the Irish Bryans, because of this alleged Prince William who got exiled in like sometime between 1650 and 1660. The Bryans got expelled from Ireland by Cromwell from England when England took over Ireland. It's a long story that was like, 400 years before I was born. But here we are. They all ended up in the North Carolina province. And Daniel Boone, he's a very famous person. And over the years, some of the family members moved to Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri. They all kind of migrated west. But back in the day, these Davises that my dad had no idea that we descended from, they were very wealthy because they were the settlers. They were the frontiersmen who helped settle the American colonies before we were the United States. I mean, some of these people fought in the Revolutionary War. I've got other relatives who fought in the Civil War, which was much later. But back in the 1700s, there were these well-to-do families, the Boones, the Davises, and the British or Irish Bryans, and all Northwest European families. Now, who knew until a few years before my illness that I might be actually related to these people? And then this Debbie Boone video, for whatever reason, shows up on my phone, and I'm like, Oh, so she's a descendant of the Boones too, like Daniel Boone. Like, oh, well, so am I. But through marriage, because his wife was related to me. So I'm like, let me look this up. You know what, Gloria, I have to take you out because I'm telling my historical background right now, Gloria. So you guys just have to, like, handle the chat until I can get there again. So let me just read this, and hopefully my cousin Brenda and my cousin Randy will see this video. I was going to do a long form content, but nobody watches those anymore. So it was better for me to do just a live video and just put it all out there. And then, you know, they can listen to it, their kids can listen to it, and they can all figure out how they're related. Hey, Jason. So it says, you, April Davis, are a cousin to Daniel Boone's children and a collateral relative to Daniel Boone himself by marriage. Now, I already knew that before all this came up this week regarding the other Boone family, because your 3 times great-grandfather, Thomas Hampton Davis, inherits his Bryan bloodline directly through his mother, Susanna Bryan. Your biological connection is entirely rooted in the Bryan family of Rowan and Davidson County, North Carolina. Then it goes on to say things like Daniel Boone married Rebecca Bryan in 1756. Rebecca's father, Joseph Bryan, and her uncles, including one of my great-grandfathers, James Bryan, are the foundational pillars of the North Carolina Bryan clan. So basically, Rebecca Bryan's uncle is one of my great-great-great-grandfathers, like a million times over. Also, Susanna Bryan, who is my 4 times great-grandmother, belongs to this exact same pioneer Bryan generation, okay? And it goes on. And then Thomas Hampton Davis comes in, and James Monroe Davis, and Henry Eddie Davis, who is my great-grandfather. I mean, this goes way back. Now, it says, April Davis, you are a direct blood relative, and I already kind of knew this, of Daniel Boone's children and a cousin to Daniel Boone himself by marriage. Daniel Boone's wife was Rebecca Ann Bryan Boone, daughter of Joseph Bryan, niece to James Bryan, who is my 6 times great-grandfather. Yes, I already said that. Hey, V-Miss. Further, April Davis, you are a direct bloodline niece to Rebecca Bryan Boone across several generations, specifically her first cousin 6 times removed. Now, I've also read that the Davises and the Boones are related in more ways than one. But so far, this is the line that I've traced. It says your biological connection to her is incredibly close because your 7 times great-grandfather, James Bryan, was her direct uncle. Now, I knew that from back when I started this a few years ago. It says, by providing the details of your 4 times great-grandparents, John Robert Davis and Susanna Bryan, born in 1787, your exact lineage connects directly to one of the most famous households in American frontier history. Now, when I talked to my mom about this when she was still alive, before I was ill or before I was diagnosed, and we talked about this a little bit, she said that my dad, who she was no longer married to because he was now Canadian and had a new family, that he would be absolutely shocked. And there's another kicker to this, because this Susanna Bryan, who's one of my great-grandmothers, was the daughter of Henry Bryan. And Daniel Boone, him and his wife, who I'm related to, Rebecca Bryan Boone, they had 10 children, apparently 6 boys and 4 girls. But her aunt, who was also a Rebecca Enochs, who was one of my great-grandparents from way back when, she died at a young age and left orphaned 6 children. And those children were taken in by Daniel Boone and his wife, who is my first cousin once removed, to raise them. Even though they had 10 children of their own, they took in 6 more kids, to include Henry Bryan. He's one of my great-grandfathers. He was the son of James Bryan, okay? So Daniel Boone's uncle, his wife, also Rebecca, dies, and they take in as fosters 6 more kids. Okay, so it says that my great-grandfather times 5, Henry Bryan, was literally raised from the age of 6 years old inside Daniel Boone's own household. He even went on frontier migrations alongside Uncle Daniel. Hey, Sandy. Yeah, I knew this before my cancer diagnosis. I was diagnosed in 2019. I think I found this out around 2017, 2018, because I remember at the time telling my mom how bad I was feeling. I mean, I was really like, what's wrong with me? And I started looking this up, but then my life blew up, and just when I thought I recovered from my cancer, then the heart ailment started. And so it was weird that I see this video, like in the middle of the night, comes to my phone, and it's Debbie Boone. And I'm like, oh, I'm not following Debbie Boone. What's this? And I was like, wow, she still looks really good, but she sure is old. Well, how old is she? And then I looked her up, like, oh, she's only 69. And now, 20 years ago, 69 would seem old. At my age, 69 doesn't seem old at all, even though I have quite a ways to get there. And these people, by the way, Debbie Boone, Pat Boone, and all their descendants, they live like 15, 20 minutes away from me. I wish I had known then what I know now, because I could have said, ringy dingy dingy, Cousin Debbie, can you come over here? I have stage 3 cancer. I need help. Okay. So, as it goes on, it says that April Davis, well, let me go back for a minute. Your ancestors did not just live near Daniel Boone, they were his immediate family. Your 4 times great-grandmother, Susanna Bryan, grew up hearing first-hand stories from her father, Henry, about what it was like to be raised by Daniel and Rebecca Boone on the American frontier. So so Daniel Boone is a cousin-in-law, but his wife, Rebecca, is a first cousin 6 times removed. I didn't even know somebody from that many generations ago could be a first cousin. But luckily, I have these genealogical sites, the internet, Google, and AI to help piece this all together. And now I'm finding pictures of some of these people, which is really cool. But here's what I just found out when I started researching Debbie Boone's age, that she and her father were direct descendants of Daniel Boone. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. Well, weren't the baseball Boones direct descendants? Like, whoa. Okay, let me go down the rabbit hole. Because remember, I've been a Dodger fan since I was 3. In the last few years, it's been very hard for me to wrap my mind around the fact that my distant cousin is the manager of the New York Yankees. Just saying. That's a little side note. But first, let's talk about my cousin Debbie and Pat. April Davis, you are a distant blood cousin to Pat Boone and his daughter Debbie Boone. Your connection to them mirrors your connection to Daniel Boone, because Pat Boone and Daniel Boone's 4 times great-grandson is Daniel Boone's great-grandson 4 times through a paternal line. So then it calculates the cousins. It says, because you share direct biological Bryan family DNA with Daniel Boone's children, and Pat and Debbie Boone are direct descendants of those children, you are connected through your 5 times great-grandfather, Henry Bryan. So that's how I'm connected to the Pat and Debbie Boone family. It says, Pat Boone, you are his 5th cousin, 4 times removed. I hope my cousins watch this. You guys just, bear with me for a moment. Debbie Boone, you are her 5th cousin, 5 times removed. I'm mind blown by that, especially since they live so close to me. But when I want to meet them now, when I'm, still recovering and I'm so, fat from all these meds, no, I need to lose 30 or 35 pounds before I might consider meeting my new family. I'm just kidding. Now, this is a part I already knew, but I had to confirm. Okay, I've lost the chat here because I just got to go on about this. April Davis. And this is the part that really gets me, because, I'm wearing my baseball shirt. Right now I'm wearing my Minnesota Twins shirt. April Davis, you are a distant blood cousin to the famous baseball Boone family, including Ray, Bob, Brett, Matt, and Yankees manager Aaron Boone. Now, let's not forget the next generation, because Brett has a son, Jake Boone, who played minor league baseball for the Washington Nationals and for the Independent League, and he is currently in the front office of the New York Mets. So let's not forget the 4th generation of baseball Boones, because the first was Ray, the second was Bob, and the third was Brett, Matt, and Aaron. And what's really crazy is when I was a kid, like in the early 80s, I've actually been to Bob Boone's home, but I wasn't inside the home. But I've been on their property a couple times with the family that I used to stay with in New Jersey. And one of their kids went to school with Aaron Boone. And we were over on their property picking up him at a lake. It's a long story. But I was like, wow, I'm at Bob Boone's house. I thought that was so big. Like, wow, he's a catcher for the Phillies. And then we were sitting around the dinner table and we were making comparisons to my family, the family I was staying with, and the Boones. And we were like, hey, we're all from Southern California. And we're all sitting in New Jersey right now in the same neighborhood. Like, that's so bizarro. Like, but I didn't know then that I had this relation to the Boones. So it says, because the baseball Boones are direct paternal descendants of Daniel Boone, your connection to them mirrors your connection to Daniel Boone's original household. You are linked through your shared Bryan family, once again, the Irish Bryans, that my dad didn't know he was related to. Only my mom was supposed to be Irish, not my dad. So I am linked through your shared Bryan family ancestry from 18th century North Carolina. Yeah, because this was in the 1700s. And then it says, the baseball Boone dynasty traces directly through Daniel Boone's lineage. Ray Boone, the patriarch of the MLB family dynasty, was Daniel Boone's 4 times great-grandson. Bob Boone is Daniel Boone's 5th time great-grandson. And Brett, Aaron, and Matt are his 6 great-grandsons. Because you are a 5th cousin, 4 times removed to Daniel Boone's children, the generational shift phases or places you as a 9th to 11th cousin. And it says your precise cousin relationship is Ray Boone, you are 9th cousin, 2 times removed. Bob Boone, who I remember being one of my favorite ball players when I was a kid, you are his 10th cousin, once removed. I also really enjoyed watching Brett and Aaron Boone play. Brett, Aaron, and Matt Boone, you are their 11th cousin, and not on the AI printout because they couldn't go that far down the pike. I am also a 12th cousin to little Jakey, who is now a grown man, minor league career much like Matt, but he does work for the New York Mets, which is pretty funny because his uncle Aaron is the manager of the Yankees. And I'm like, what? Now, I knew this about the baseball Boones a few years ago, but I just needed to prove it. I didn't know any of this about Debbie Boone and Pat Boone until this week. So, I'm sure you guys are all bored to stone, but at least some of my extended family, like my nieces and my cousin Brenda and my cousin Randy, can hear this. Like, I texted to Randy a little bit about it yesterday, and he said, oh, you know, through your grandpa Davis, you're related to Dick Clark. And I was like, I didn't know that. And he goes, yeah, your grandmother was like, or your great-grandma was Ellen Elmira Clark, and she's related to Dick Clark. And you know, your grandmother told my mother this, you know, years ago, like in the 50s or something. Like, I didn't know. So I don't have any proof of that, but supposedly I'm related to Dick Clark. I know some of my mother's relatives through marriage are also related to Rock Hudson on her side. But her Irish side, they were indentured servants. They were poor. They were indentured servants that were like slaves that were brought over on these ships, you know. But yet the Bryans, who my dad had no knowledge that he was related to the family that may or may not be royals. There's a lot of conflict information about their history, but they are the Irish Bryans. So Sandy says, very interesting. Christy Harry says, pretty cool. I shouldn't, Annette. I do know that my grandmother on my dad's side, my dad's mother, her grandfather fought in the Civil War, and his name was Frank Zillion, like million, trillion, zillion. And it was short for Francis, and he was actually an immigrant from Germany who came over and fought in the U.S. Civil War for the Union. But I don't have any, you know, I have my birth certificate, but I don't have my parents' birth certificates or my grandparents' birth certificates. But, you know, on my grandmother Davis's side, I am a zillion, which is That's where my German ancestry, or some of it, comes from. But I do know that when I was researching this multiple years ago, that I did see that some of the family members had fought in the American Revolution. And I also saw that a few of them along the way were killed by the Apache Indians. But back in the day, these families, they had very large families. They got married when they were like 16, 17 years old. They started having kids right away. By the time they were, probably 40, they were already like grandparents. They probably lived to be great-grandparents or great-great-grandparents. But these genealogical websites are wonderful because that's how I confirmed, some of my Irish ancestry, my British ancestry, which includes England, Scotland, and Wales. I have a lot of ancestry from London. Not as much Irish as I thought. A lot of German on both sides, even though my grandfather Simlo, his family apparently immigrated from Holland, but originally they were German, which my mom didn't even know any of that because she's like, all I know is they came from Holland. And I'm like, well, they probably did, but they were German because Simlo was not a Dutch name, it's a German name. And their languages and their cultures are very similar, and the countries are right next to each other. So there's some German, there's some Dutch, there's some Irish, there's some British, including English, Welsh, and Scottish. A little bit of a few other countries as well, like Finland and Sweden, and like I think 1% Lithuanian. It's been Eastern Europe, but they've never been able to trace it until recently. So it's kind of cool. It's kind of, my hat is falling down. You can't see my face, but that's okay. Kelsa says, apparently I am related to royalty, but we sold our land in Maryland for a fifth of whiskey because my ancestors were alcoholics. That's a good one. I heard that this Prince William of Ireland, who was like the unofficial Prince of Ireland, but he got kicked out by Cromwell, who came over from England and said, during the rebellion between England and Ireland, and you're out. He was like rich, and they took they kicked out him, his wife, something like 11 sons, 3 daughters, and 10 grandsons. And he brought, not only did they bring their stuff, but they even brought their horses. Like he was exiled in the mid 1600s, and they landed on a beach in Virginia. And, mostly Dallas helicopters coming in with the first Super Chat of the day, Canadian Super Chat. Thank you, my Canadian family and friends. So, like, I kind of knew some of this before the whole cancer crap show happened, but I got sidetracked for, 6, 7, or 8 years. And just because some weird video pops up on my phone of Debbie Boone singing happy birthday to her dad, I look one thing up on her, and it says, oh, they're direct descendants of Daniel Boone. And I'm like, yeah, so are the baseball Boones, who we're related to. Even though I'm not related to Daniel Boone, I'm related to his wife, who was an Irish Bryan. And then, my dad had no idea that before the family was in Illinois, that when they came to, not the United States, but they came to the American colonies, that there was a big, part of his family that he descended from that were very wealthy landowners in Northwest North Carolina, and they were basically the frontiersmen, but they were prominent families like the Boones and the Bryans, and apparently there was another family in there too, mixed in, called the Carters, and they were all like prominent families, and they all had lots of kids and grandkids, and they all like married into each other's families. And you can look this up even in Google, because that family is so prominent, and it says that the Davis family, that they're related in more ways than one to Daniel Boone. So there are other connections to the Daniel Boone family, but so far the only one that I can prove is that his wife is my first cousin 6 times removed. Like, I didn't even know there was such a thing, because I just knew like my first cousins are my uncle's kids, and I only have 2 first cousins my entire life. I didn't know that somebody from the 1700s could be my first cousin, but my first cousin 6 times removed. And so all of her kids, who she had with Daniel Boone, and there were 10 of them, 6 boys and 4 girls, those are my relatives. And then she also raised 6 of her first cousins because their mother, also named Rebecca, died young. And back in those days when there was big families like that and the mother died, the father usually sent the kids out to live with other families because they were out on the frontier. You know, they were catching the food and hunting and fishing and, you know, building the roads, you know, for the horse-drawn carriages, like fighting the Indians. You know, some of them were killed by the Apaches. Some of them fought in the American Revolution. I know, you know, in like, what was it, the mid-1860s, one of my great-grandfathers fought in the Civil War. Like, you know, this is pretty amazing stuff to me, but I didn't know about the Debbie and Pat Boone connection. And I was like, whoa, that's pretty cool. So then I'm like, well, I need to know more about them because I've always loved Debbie Boone. And my ex-boyfriend from years ago, he met Pat Boone one time in Beverly Hills, and, you know, he was a little older than me, so he was thrilled. He thought, oh, Pat Boone, like, he was so famous. Like, I'm like, that's before my time. And I remember he was so tickled to death to meet Pat Boone. But I did look up Pat Boone, and there was some information that he is a far-right conservative Christian. Now, I was raised Christian as well, but I'm not like a Bible thumper, you know, or some people would call it a Jesus freak. I'm religious, but not like I'm a Bible thumping Christian. And apparently he's one of those Bible thumping Christians who's heavily involved in a political party that I won't go into here because we're not going to talk politics, but he is against like all the rights for like LGBTQ plus people. You know, and I have a niece that's in that group of people. And I accept everybody, especially in my channel. We don't talk religion or politics, but there's no racism. There's no anti-Semitism like somebody that came in yesterday and, you know, tried to say something bad about the Jews. Like, no, that's not going to be tolerated here. And the same thing with the LGBTQ plus people. Like, everybody here is welcome. We're inclusive to everybody. And so to read that Pat Boone, that for years he's been very politically active as a conservative Christian, and, you know, he has tried to like go after the rights of that group of people, that's a little disturbing to me. What are the dates of Rebecca Bryan's birth and death? You know, I could look, but it's in my phone. It's on my Ancestry.com, but I do have their exact dates of birth and their places of birth. But if you look up, you know, Daniel Boone's wife, it's probably there because there's actually pictures of her. And most of them are just drawings, like sketches, but there are some actual pictures of her on the internet. So Rebecca Ann Bryan, and Bryan is spelled B-R-Y-A-N, Bryan, Boone is my first cousin 6 times removed. And so therefore Daniel Boone is for sure he's my cousin-in-law through his marriage to his wife, but the history books also say that the Boones and the Davises are related in multiple ways. So there could, if there's a connection, you know, that's a higher generation than Daniel and Rebecca, then I might actually be related to Daniel as well. But so far, I've only been able to prove that he's a cousin-in-law through his marriage to my first cousin 6 times removed. And it's all through the Bryan great-grandparents that were related. But that means I'm also related to all of his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren, and some of his direct descendants are the baseball Boones, who, like, my whole life, I've had a fascination with that family. Like I said, in 1980, I was actually on their property a couple times at their house, going to pick up my bestie's little brother who was swimming in a lake behind their house. And I remember we had driven by it a couple times, and they're like, "Hey, that's Bob Boone's house." And her little brother, his name was Mark, and he was like, "Oh yeah, his son Aaron is in, or his son Brett is in my class, and he's got a little brother named Aaron Boone." And we had become big Phillies fans, even though we were Dodger fans first, because we were all Angelinos. Well, Stephanie and her brother, they had come from Orange County, but their mom and their dad were Angelinos, and I was an Angelino, and we all met on the Gulf Coast, and then we all moved to the East Coast, and I was back and forth all the time between Alabama, Maryland, and New Jersey. And one day they just drove me to this neighborhood that was a few blocks from where they lived, and they're like, "Look, that's baseball player Bob Boone's house." And I was like, "Oh, that's so cool." And then at some point during that particular summer, because I was there for almost a month, I think, we went over there to drop off her brother and then to go pick him up at the lake. And I remember it was like a contemporary house. It had wood siding, but it had these big tall windows. It looked very out of place in Medford Lakes, New Jersey, when most of the houses have like aluminum siding. But this was like big wood panels with glass, and it was very contemporary. It wouldn't be now because it was probably built in the 70s. But then it was like, wow, this is a really modern, like custom design house. And, there was a lot of famous, like Philadelphia Eagles and Philadelphia 76ers and Philadelphia Phillies that lived in that neighborhood. But I remember being so like, wow, I'm at Bob Boone's house. And then when I, moved back to California, he switched leagues at some point and went to the American League, Bob Boone. And baseball players, they didn't do that in the day. They stayed with their team their whole career, or then they started getting traded within their league. But it was very rare for a player to go out of his league. And they were back in Southern California. And I'm like, oh, how fitting. I'm back in Southern California. And Bob Boone, and, he's in Southern California. And then his kids were a few years younger than me, and they played at USC. And I remember that because I was out in college in LA. And I was like, oh, now they're at USC. And, and I never knew until I was like in, I don't know, late 40s, early 50s, that I was possibly related to them. And I started the research, and I put all the connections together, but then it got dropped for my illness, and now I picked it back up, and I thought about doing a long-form video, but nobody watches my long-form videos. So I was like, well, here we go. I'm just going to do it like this, and I'll let both of my cousins know so they know. And I'll let my niece know, because I just discovered one of my nieces last night is on Ancestry.com, and she just signed up, and I'm like, oh, I don't know if she knows that I'm on there too. And I have another, like a cousin that's on my 23andMe, but I need to contact my niece, little B, and let her know, like, hey, I see you're on Ancestry, and so am I, and let's connect our trees. I don't know how to do all that. How do I connect my tree to her tree? But we should connect on there. And then I'll let her know, like, hey, if you want to know more about the Davis side of the family, since my dad would be her paternal grandfather, like, you're related to the Boones too. Of course, she probably doesn't, she's young. She probably doesn't know who the baseball Boones are, or Pat and Debbie Boone, like the musicians. So, whatever. He is a very nice man. Who's a nice man? Oh, here we go. Nanette met Pat Boone in Branson, Missouri after a show in the early 90s. That's what my ex-boyfriend told me. He met him in Beverly Hills, like in a building. They took an elevator ride together, and then they just started talking. And he was all thrilled about that. And he would meet celebrities. He had celebrity clients. I had celebrity clients. But it was so funny to see him get so worked up about, this old man, this Pat Boone. Who I didn't know at the time I was related to. But I was, even though he said he's a very nice man, and I think he probably really is, but, his values for, 2026 seem a little backwards, if he's like trying to push against certain people that, that's not cool to me. Like, there should be no racism, bigotry, or everybody should be included. That's just how I always feel about life. Sandy says that's what I went through, 23andMe. I did that first, and then I did Ancestry. And it's funny because over the years, when you look at your heritage, those countries can change a lot or a little bit. Like they kind of have perfected it. And I was trying to get my mom to sign up because they were like, you really need like a parent. And you especially need like a male member of your family. But my dad was already gone. My uncle was already gone. All my grandparents were gone when I was young. And I'm like, I don't have any brothers. I mean, I got my cousin. That's the only male member. And then he's got a son. And his daughter's, she's in one of them with me. But I was trying to get my mom to do it. But, my mom, she always had financial issues. And I guess she just didn't have an extra. I said, it's only like $60, Mom. Like, I'll pay for it. And she was like, no, like, maybe later. Like, she wasn't into it. And that would really help me because then I'd be able to tell, like, okay, some of this is coming from her side, or some of this other stuff is coming from my dad's side. Since one of my cousins on my dad's side, like, his kid is in it. And she's like my second cousin once removed or something like that. So I wish my parents had, my dad wasn't even alive when all these sites came out, but my mom was, and I wish she had done it. And I wish my dad had lived long enough to know all of this. But, the big C just ravages my family. 3 grandparents, a dad, and a rabbit. And now me. And I'm the youngest one that's been struck. But I'm the one that's lived the longest with my conditions. But I know I'm not going to live forever. So I'm glad that I got this off my to-do list. And like I said, I'm just doing this video for my own documentation, for my family's documentation. But if you guys who watch me through the Nancy Guthrie case or however you're watching me, if you want to listen to this, go for it. They can share it, download it. You mean like my niece sharing the family trees? Emerald Eyes. I think I have that name, my Rebecca Bryan, in my ancestry too. But this one was not born until 1790. I can't look her up right now because, well, I could look her up on the internet behind me, but then I'll have to move this phone around. Let me see. I can't, I have it all in my phone. I don't have it on my computer. That's where all my apps are. Let's see. Oh, Rebecca Bryan Boone was born January 9th, 1739. However, she did have a daughter. One of her daughters, I think, was named Rebecca too, I think. I'd have to look. But she wouldn't have been born in like 1990, that would be. Or 1790. But it could be a grandchild. Don't know. But she was a Boone. So she was a Bryan. She's Rebecca Ann Bryan Boone. Nanette says he's 92 years old, so unfortunately they think negatively. Yeah, I didn't know about. Because, I remember my ex saying, oh, I met Pat Boone, and he was such a great guy. And then, I just looked this up. I was so funny about my clothing malfunction. It wasn't funny to me. Like I said, if any of you saw that, I don't want to know. Because I almost lost my pants. And yes, that story that I talked about last night, without, we don't want to go off this subject here, but yeah, that was a couple that something very bad went down. Completely unrelated to the Nancy Guthrie case that I've been reporting on here. Brian Warray said, hello. Now, who did I miss while all this was going on? So thank you for listening to me. I'll have to go back and listen. Just so... It's weird because I can see, pictures of her a little bit. And apparently she was just as famous as him because a lot of times, like Daniel Boone, he was off frontiering, and she was there with her 10 kids and then her 6 cousins that so she had 16 kids, and she would go out with her rifle and she would hunt and fish and, she's a very famous person, not just because she's his wife, but in her own right. She was a real trailblazer. It seems like she had some snap to her. But since there's like how many generations? Like 6 generations that separate us? Like I'm sure my Boone bloodline is tiny, you know. But yeah, the Davises and the Boones and the Bryans are all interconnected. Now, I'd like to know the other relation because it said that the Boones and the Davises are directly related in more than one way. There's multiple family connections there. But I know that my connection is through my great-grandparents that were the Irish Bryans. So that's also how I'm connected to Debbie and Pat Boone, and that's how I'm related bloodline to the baseball Boone family. The Boone family dynasty. That's so cool to me. I don't even have any of their baseball cards. Anybody got any baseball cards from the Boones? Send them my way. Just kidding. Because I don't have anything like that, like from my childhood, like baseball cards. And their sons, they played like more in my adult life. I got some Dodger stuff, and I got some random cards that are on Whatnot, but they're just like, card packs that I won from other, like, sellers on Whatnot. And I just kind of like, pass them back and forth. I got a couple packs on eBay. I think I got like 6 packs left of those, if even that. And I have no idea what's in them because I haven't looked at them. Sandy says, Pat Boone, a great singer. Yes, and so is his daughter. Or I should say is. She's still alive. What are the dates of Rebecca Bryan birth and death? Well, her name was Rebecca Bryan Boone. So you can research it online. She died in March 18th, 1813. But she was a Boone. Well, she was a Bryan first. She was Rebecca Ann Bryan Boone. January 9th, 1739 through March 18th, 1813. And that makes sense because it was the 17th century that the Davises and the Boones and the Bryans and apparently the Carters were all part of that clan. And who sent me the gold coin? I missed that. Let me scroll down. Mostly Dolls Helicopters. You coming in with the only super chat and the coins today. Thank you, Mostly Dolls Helicopters. Hello, Kathy Doherty. Welcome in. Did you ever watch the TV series? I know it was fiction, but he called his wife Becky. On TV, they had a son named Isaac. I kind of remember, like, that might have been before my time. It may have aired in, like, syndication when I was a kid. When was that TV series on? Because I remembered the coonskin caps. Oh, yeah, Mostly Dolls Helicopters. Putting up the emojis. Did you notice Mostly Dolls Helicopters? For you members, I was able to add a new emoji last night. Because somebody in my chat yesterday gifted a crap ton of memberships this week, actually. In fact, let me bring that up. And she didn't need to do that, but she did. And through all those gifted memberships, let's see who it was. Gifted from Connie LA. Yeah, Connie. Connie, you gifted those memberships, and that put me up a notch where I was able to release a 12th emoji. And now they say I need 22 more members. 22? That won't even happen in my lifetime. I need 22 more members to be able to add another emoji. So, when it comes to the holidays, I may have to take some of the emojis down and substitute them with other emojis. But for now, we've got the kitty and the bunny and the detective and the palm tree and the baseball and the giraffe who's got the little monocular in his eye. So it looks like a detective giraffe. Got the movie camera, the 4th of July one. I got the jack-o'-lantern, and I got the little ghost. But the ghost is different because he's got a purple background. But still, he's kind of cute. I tried to do a bat because on some of my long form videos, I have a bat introduction. It's a long story. There's a connection to that, a personal connection, why there's the singing bats. But I couldn't get the bats to size right. I couldn't get the 1:1 ratio for some reason, and they wouldn't load. So what was supposed to be a simple thing to add one more ended up taking hours. So for now, there's a ghost. But thank you for putting those up. Mostly Dolls helicopters. Also, oh, Kathy Doherty just threw them out. Connie, LA66, threw them out. I see the happy emoji from Mostly Dolls Helicopters. Yeah, those are all the custom emojis. And apparently you can also use them when you're commenting on the video. Somebody sent me a message last night like, where are my emojis? And I'm like, just go put your stuff in the comments and click the little emoji button and they should pop up. Any news about Nancy? Nope, not at all. And the story I reported on last night appears to be unconnected entirely. It was a 43-year-old woman and a 64-year-old man. So the man that we talked about, he was the person that did the evil deed. But the woman we had talked about, that wasn't her. That was somebody else. That's maybe an ex-wife or a sibling, I don't know. But he was married to a much younger woman, a 43-year-old woman. And he went over to the neighbor's house and left a note on their door saying, hey, I just did this to my wife and I'm getting ready to do this to myself. And then he called 911 and said, hey, this is what I just did. So you can come find us because I'm going to take myself out. And he did. So I don't know what was going on in that family, but it was, it was probably like a second marriage and she was a young woman. And I think she had kids. Now they don't have a mom anymore. So I don't know why people do evil things like that. Patricia Blair played Rebecca Boone on TV from 1964 to 1970. Well, I would have been alive for part of that. That's probably why I don't remember, but I do remember it. But I don't think I saw it. I watched it in syndication. She had long reddish hair like me. See, I didn't watch it, but I remember like the intro or something. Pennsylvania Boone's neighbors of my husband's Reverend War ancestor, Jacob Henry. Oh, cool. What I remember is that he wore the coonskin cap. And when I was a real little kid, we went to Disney World. Well, I'd been to Disneyland as a toddler many times because we lived in LA. We weren't that far. Back then, LA wasn't an hour away from LA. LA wasn't 4 hours away from Orange County. So we used to go to Disneyland a lot. But when we lived in southern Alabama, we did go to Disney World a couple times. And when I went the first time, it was a year before this country's bicentennial. Remember, 1976? We were there in 75. And that theme park was selling muskets from the Revolutionary War. They weren't real, but they were replicas. And they were selling coonskin caps. And they were expensive, but they were the rage. And every family that had children that were walking through Disneyland, they were stopping at those gift shops that were everywhere, and they were buying the Revolutionary War muskets, which were like, they looked like real rifles, but they were toys. Can you imagine today? Would they let somebody be walking around in Disney with toy rifles? But they did. And every kid, even not just the boys, but the girls were into them as well. And so somewhere on a slide, there's a picture of a 10-year-old me with long red hair, gold-rimmed little teeny glasses because they hadn't invented, contact lenses yet. And I've got one of those Revolutionary War muskets, and I've got my Daniel Boone coonskin cap, and it had like a tail, like a raccoon that went, down my neck. And so there's a nerdy little picture of a little girl with, blonde red hair, glasses, with a Daniel Boone hat, and a musket. And it's probably like 95 degrees and 100% humidity, and we're all just like sweating bullets. And my sister, who was just like, she was like 4 years old, soon to be 5. She's standing there with like some mouse glasses or something. And she's very dark because my sister would tan so much that she could have been mistaken for Hispanic or African American. Her skin would turn almost black. And here I am, my little white freckled face, sweaty with my, probably even sweating bullets with that because it was made out of some kind of fake fur. So I had this fur hat, my Daniel Boone hat, and my gun, And no, I wasn't like a tomboy per se, but all the kids were buying them. So I was like, oh, I got to have that. Now I wish I had it. I wish I had all my toys and little knickknacks that I collected, throughout my travels as a child, because some of that stuff today would be worth a lot of money. Like, hey, this is the Disney, bicentennial musket with coonskin cap. They did show how badly the Indians were treated, yes, and portray the Indians as an intelligent people, but somewhat realistic. Wow. Yeah, because, the British settlers basically came in and just raped and murdered the Indians. I shouldn't say that word, but that's what happened. Yeah, I don't think I ever saw the show, but I kind of remember, like, the intro. I'd have to look it up on, like, YouTube or Google and see if anybody's got a copy of that intro. Because I would have been that show came on before I was born. But I was alive for, like, part of it. But I was very, very young. I wouldn't have, understood the references. Nor would I have understood that I was sort of related to all that through his wife. It's mind-blowing. So, if you're watching this, Debbie and Pat Boone of Beverly Hills, I'm your cousin. I'm over the hill in the valley. Yeah, I'm a valley girl. I'm not a Beverly Hills girl. Although I have, worked a lot in Beverly Hills my entire career. I'm in the valley. And it's funny because the Boones used to be neighbors with the Osbournes. And Pat Boone, he actually sang the theme song for the Osbournes reality TV show that was on MTV, which I thought was really cool. And I think they knew each other when they were neighbors in Malibu, but then they were also neighbors in Beverly Hills, briefly, for a couple of years. Mostly Dallas Helicopters coming in with the clutch. That's amazing. I actually have more in jewels today from all you guys that have sent than what I have in the chats. Okay, that's interesting. Not that I'm here for that. Kathy says he's a nice guy. That's what my ex-boyfriend said. He, and he worked with celebrities. I worked with celebrities. So both of us would very rarely ever be starstruck. But he was very starstruck, and he was telling me all about him. And I'm like, well, like, I know who his daughter Debbie is. And he was like, who's that? And I'm like, oh my God. Like this guy's too old for me because he knew more about Pat and didn't know anything about Debbie. Connie sent the flower. Thank you, my dear. But yeah, he's like 92 now. Dang. I know that a few years ago, because I'm local here to LA, that one of his other daughters, and I can't remember, it might have been Sherry Boone, but because he's got 4 daughters, and one of his daughters has a son that is named Ryan. I don't know his last name because she's married, but Boone's her maiden name. And he had a really bad fall. It was all over the news here. He had some sort of a catastrophic fall, and he had a traumatic brain injury, and they didn't know if he was going to survive, and, he was going to have to, rehabilitate, like, for the rest of his life, and he couldn't walk or talk, or it was something really tragic that happened in the Boone family. But, everybody was pulling for the kid, and, at least they had the money to treat him. I think, Pat Boone is a pretty rich guy. And his daughter, she didn't hardly make a penny off that song, You Light Up My Life, because she was just hired to sing it, to perform it. But she didn't write it and she didn't own the publishing rights. So, all the millions that were made off that song never went into Debbie Boone's pocket, which is kind of sad because that's what made her famous. And she was like 20 or something when she recorded that, because I was just a little kid. Slow, or I can't see it because it's blocking the username. Soulflower sent the finger heart. Thank you. Wow, that jumped it from 2 something to 5 something. That's great. Thank you. You didn't need to do that. And it was big enough, it started a little train at the bottom of the screen. Let me get out of this screen and go back to my YouTube screen. Where was I born? I was born in the state of Rhode Island. I was born in the Ocean State, but I never lived there. Jason says he knows about falls, but it was just my spine that has degenerative arthritis. My spine is degenerative as well, some of my disc. It's very bad. I can't say, Kathy, because I'm old. I'm actually at the age that I can't say my age anymore, but I was born in Rhode Island. Ryan Corbin is Lindy Boone's son. Okay. Why did I think it might have been Cherry Boone? He is Lindy Boone's son. Did he ever recover, Ryan Corbin? Because I remember whatever happened to him, it was some sort of a catastrophic fall. Oh, you're right around Debbie Boone's age. She's 69, supposed to be 70 in September. And it was so weird that I got that video and I'm like, I don't even follow Debbie Boone. Why is she coming into my feed? And I can't remember if it was Instagram or Facebook, one of those, but she came into my feed and she was singing happy birthday to her dad, who looked pretty good for 92, I must say, in Beverly Hills. Yeah, they live in Beverly Hills, apparently. And I looked at her and I was like, wow, she's gotten really old, but she still looks really good. Like, she's always a beautiful woman. And I know through her mother-in-law is like a Clooney. She's Rosemary Clooney, and they're related to George Clooney and Nick Clooney. And I remember him from Nick Clooney when I first moved out to LA. He was a local broadcaster on Channel 4, NBC 4. But, and then his son, he grew up and he had some really bad TV roles. But yeah, the Clooneys and the Boones are all they're all related through marriage. Pat was my cousin's roommate in college. Oh, that's interesting. Lindy Boone is Ryan's mom. Happened when he was 24. Or has 24/7 care at home. Oh, still? Because I knew they weren't even sure he was going to live at the time. And I remember it was all over the news. Because they're local, they're in Beverly Hills. And it was very tragic. And a lot of celebrities were rallying behind the Boone family when that happened. And I don't remember how it happened, but I just know that it was some sort of a fall, from high up. And he had a very serious traumatic brain injury. He might have been in a coma for a while. They didn't know if he was going to survive. And he was just such a young man. It was like, oh, how tragic, because he's got his whole life ahead of him. And Connie says, embrace your age. You are still here living life, so be thankful to be your age. Considering what's happened to me, that's a pretty good statement, Connie. You look good. I look horrible right now. I'm not even recognizable. And you're 60. I wish I could see your avatar, but it's so tiny I can't really see what you look like. So, yeah, it's pretty cool about the Boone connection as far as the singers, but me, I'm a baseball gal. I have been since I was 2. And so when I found this out, I already kind of knew this about the Boone baseball dynasty, but I wasn't 100% sure of the connection, and I was like, I'll get to that later. And then my life took a terrible turn. And then just when I thought I was recovering, my heart went out and, somebody died and, my life was just a crap show. And then, I thought, it's time to get into this again. And then it was like, maybe God was reminding me, like, hey, look, here are some Boones. And then I was like, oh, I didn't know they were connected to Daniel, like the baseball Boone, so I'm connected. Like, wait a minute. Let me get back to this. And I didn't want to have to, I was able to sign into my Ancestry account, but I didn't want to have to do the paid one because it's very expensive. I think it's like several $100s a year or $30 a month. I'm like, no, I can't afford that. Like, let me just see what I can find. And so for 2 days, while I've been doing YouTube and trying to do my laundry and clean my house and get my groceries, like, it's been a crazy 2 days. I just need to, like, chill. My voice is starting to, like, go out just because I've done so much YouTube the last couple of days. All of a sudden the comments just stopped. Are you guys still here? Hopefully we didn't have one of those internet outages again, because I'm not seeing the chat move right now. It was moving great, and now it just stopped. Is anybody still here? Am I still on the air? Oh, I see the ghost. Yeah, I did 2 loads, and it almost killed me, Kathy, because it's like, last I looked, it was 89, but I think it might have actually hit the 90s today. Like, we don't get that type of weather in July. We just don't. So if this is a sign of what's to come in August and September, God help us. And I know the East Coast is suffering way more, but, when they start to cool down and they can enjoy their holiday drinks, we'll be roasting and on fire. Just saying. And it doesn't go away. It's like that for months, where it's just like, it's brutal. And, half of the ACs in this building will stop working. And they'll be like, oh, everybody's booked right now because it's a heat wave. And I can't wait until this winter, this fall winter, where they say we're going to just like, we're going to get flooding and like to biblical proportions. Like, bring it on. Bring on the cool weather. Bring on the rain, the snow for the mountains, for our water supply. Bring it on. Hello, Sandra Cosby. So yeah, this is kind of interesting. And it was much easier for me just to come on live and document what I just told you guys than to have to sit at my computer for days putting together a long form video that maybe, 50 people would watch. Management, get your AC repaired. It's working, but it's band-aided. They've used band-aids over the last 12 summers to keep it going. This October, I'll be here in this unit 13 years. I was only supposed to live here a year because I sold my house, or my townhouse, that was in the Brady Bunch neighborhood. Expected to be here a year. Then like, well, let's just take a few years and take a little bit of a break, because it's been hustle, 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 hustle. Never even had a vacation in my adult life. Like, hustle, hustle, hustle. Like, and then I started health-wise just declining. And now I'll probably be here till I'm gone, but that's the best I could hope for, because it's better to at least know that hopefully I'll still have a roof over my head. But it's getting expensive. And it won't last another summer. At some point, it'll just die altogether. And then they'll have to get the big crane and, oh my God. At least I have a little portable one that I can hook up that would at least keep a small section of the living room cool. It's loud, but at least, the rabbit and the cat would not be in peril of death. A lot. And it's about $600 higher than it was when I got here, even with rent control. It takes most of my disability check. So this YouTube channel is helping me a lot, because I got to pay myself back for the 5 years of expenses, because I've got thousands of dollars of expenses for this channel, probably $4 or $5 grand, just to this point. And I've been making a little bit since April. Well, actually, I got my first check in May. I got one in June, and then I'll get one at the end of July. And, it's a small dent in what I've spent over 5 years, but that helps. Everything helps. Not doing this for the money. And I did take a break today from Nancy. I did look at the news, and it's just the same old stories. It's going to be like the MH370 thing and the John Benet Ramsey thing, where they're just going to rehash the same story saying, breaking news, this has just happened. Like, no, that was a week ago. That was a month ago. That was 4 months ago. This is not, there's nothing newsworthy. I mean, even the YouTubers on the ground, they're running out of things to report. Something needs to break so that we will be able to continue to talk about this. Because that's more interesting than me telling you about my Boone family connection. But it was interesting. Like I said, I think my cousins, if they see the beginning of this video, they'll be in disbelief too. Although I did send a tip to my cousin Randy about it, and that's when he told me about the Dick Clark connection. Like, oh, I didn't know that. Yeah, it's not going to be good, Kathy. Well, let's not get gruesome here about that, because let's be respectful to Savannah. Like, I hope they do find her. I hope they do have some remains. But I really want the people to be caught. But we'll see what happens with that. But that's why I put the Hollywood background, because this had nothing to do with Arizona or Nancy or any of the tragic story that was coming down last night, and now we know a lot more about that. Don't think that's connected to Nancy at all. That's just a family situation gone wrong. I still got 27 people in the room. How could all you guys have come in and listened to this? Like I said, I wish I knew more about the Boone connection before, when I could have really used the help, especially the ones that are local, like Debbie and Pat and her sisters. Hey, it's Cousin April over here. I need help. Debbie, do you think you could send me some Meals on Wheels or something while I, try to get through this? Could we get some carpools going for my rides to chemo and radiation? Because I had to do the radiation all by myself because of the pandemic. But at least the freeways were empty. That's the only way I could have made it that far. But yeah, I don't think they would give two F's that, we're like 1% related. Oh, gosh. Oh, I see a red heart across the screen. I was like, gosh, am I still alive? 23 people, 33 thumbs up. Everybody give this a thumbs up. Thank you to those that sent the jewels today. And thank you, Mostly Does Helicopters, for the only super chat of the day. I appreciate that. All the way from Canada. Those are always so thrilling to me when I see those come in from other countries. Especially if it's like a new country. Like we had, what was it, Norway the other night? And I was like, wow, what's that? I don't even know what country that is. Like, where are you from? They had like the little symbol of the Norwegian crones. I didn't recognize that one. That was pretty cool. Very generous. So it's so neat meeting all you guys from all over the country and all over the world. So far today, it just like it looks like we're just U.S. and Canada, unless I missed somebody in the beginning of the chat. But if you're in from another country, let me know where you're in from. And speaking of the Kathys, because I have Kathy Doherty in here, and I had the other Kathy in here at the beginning. I haven't seen Kathy Mallory lately. And I haven't seen my Kellys lately either. Where are my Kellys and my Karens? And one of my Kathys is missing. I hope she's doing well. Maybe she can check in on the replay. But I do have some of my Sandys in here. A couple of my Sandys came in today. Got a lot of my members in here now. Well, you know, because you guys have been throwing out so many gifts. Later in the month of July, which is, we're already in July, but it's still like, we're only the beginning of the second week of July. We're at the 8th. But towards the middle, towards the end part of July, then I'll have a few more that I can throw out to the chat as far as the memberships. At no cost to you. But thank you for those who are the members, whether you were paid members or you were gifted members, for throwing in the new emoji. It looks kind of cute on screen. I wasn't sure like how it was going to look, so I'm glad you guys posted the most recent one. That's really cool. It wasn't easy to make. I was trying to get up the bat because if you've seen the long form videos, you would see the bat connection, and I was like, oh, that would be a good one for Halloween, but couldn't get the bat made, so went with the ghost. And when it gets closer to like Thanksgiving, Christmas, I'd like to add like maybe a turkey and a Santa Claus and a Christmas tree, but I'll have to probably take some other ones down in order to put up more, because they're like, you need another 22 members. Like, I'm not that big, YouTube. They've slowly been increasing it. It went from 4 to 9 to 10 to 11 to 12. Like, if you get umpteen more, we'll give you one more. And these big channels, like some of these airline channels, they'll have like 100 custom emojis because they've got like 500,000 followers or whatever, or subscribers. But hey, I'm happy to have what I've got. I'm happy that I made it this far. And thank you for all the thumbs up and the little smiley faces and the party hats, because that just shows, the YouTube algorithm that you guys are liking this. Thank you for the comments. Make sure to thumbs up the video. Be sure to use your hype points on any of some of my long form ones if you want. That's where I need my views more, is on the long form. And that's just not, I haven't figured that out yet, so I still don't consider myself a YouTube success story. But I am enjoying, all my new friends and family and my new YouTube family here. Thank you guys for spending your afternoon or your evening with me. But I think I'm going to finally relax and go get something to eat. Enjoy the fact that I've got clean underwear now. Hey, Brian. There's a Brian right there. His Brian is spelled just like the Irish Brians that we were talking about earlier. B-R-Y-A-N, yeah. Because we had another Brian in here earlier, but it was B-R-I-A-N, but we were talking about the Irish Brian, so that's so funny. Okay, you too. Thank you, April. I hope you have a great night, and I'm going to relax and grab some dinner. Have something good. And because you know what? I dread turning on my oven for even like 20 minutes to cook another turkey burger, but I got to eat those because I don't want them to go bad. Because I don't like to eat like old or expired food. That's too risky for me. So I am going to have to heat up that oven. It's going to kill my AC. Get that turkey burger on the broiler. There's got to be an easier way. But I know if I had some little portable grill, it would set off all the alarms and there'd be no place to put it. That's why it would be so cool to have a house, because then I could just, go out in the backyard and throw a turkey burger on the barbecue. It would be so easy. And a washing machine. A barbecue and a washing machine. That would make me happy, people. And maybe a little baby pool, because I have to go all the way to the next building, which is too close to the freeway. And when you sit up by the pool, you're like breathing in all the, the fumes from the automobile. So, and they just redid the deck, and I haven't gone to see it yet. I need to do that. I need to get my Thai family, my little nephews over here, and say, hey, they redid the pool, and let's get together since it's hot. But thank you for coming in. I appreciate you. Oh, thank you for throwing up the baseball. You know what? I'm gonna have to do a deep dive tonight on like eBay or something and look at some of the Boone baseball cards. Not that I have money to buy them, but just take a look at them. Read about the baseball Boones. That's so cool. As is Debbie. Like I said, cousin Debbie in Beverly Hills. I'm just over the hill. You know, like I'm not in the West Valley. I'm in the East Valley. I'm not far from you, cousin Debbie. I know I'll never hear from them, but it's kind of a cool thing to document this. You know, my nieces, you know, maybe someday they'll have kids and they'll have this for documentation. We bought a little countertop oven called a New Wave. It's handy. Yeah, you know, too bad my apartment, like my condos and townhouses, I had like microwaves that were installed above the range. But here, there's no such thing. They're doing that in the renovations, but not in mine. And so the one little teeny counter space I have has got a microwave on it, which is too heavy for me to lift. There's no place to put anything. This place is, I have outgrown this place like 10 times over. And I don't like clutter or stuff. I like to have a place. I like cleanliness and nothing cluttered. But this place is really too small for me. But I'm just thankful to still have a roof over my head. But I do need some little portable thing where I don't have to turn on my oven, because I can't really afford to like say, hey, Uber Eats, DoorDash, Postmates, which is now part of Uber Eats, but you know, I don't want to turn on my oven, so can you deliver or something? You know, that's another $20 or $30 just for something that's like one meal. Like I can't do that. You know, even the grocery store now, it seems like I did a pickup Monday. I think there was 4 bags. And they used like extra bags, because when you pick up, the bags, you know, we can't use plastic here in California, so if they get too heavy, they'll tear. So they use a lot of extra paper bags. And I'm like, there's just a few things in here. How's this going to last me a week? Sassy Granny, I'm getting ready to go off the air. Sorry you missed me, but can you watch this on the replay? Because this is an interesting one. But it was nice to see you, Sassy Granny. And thank you once again for my Rode mics. I love them. And I love you too, my friend. Okay, talk to everybody soon. Bye-bye.